Welcome to this deep dive into India's cement industry. If you're interested in business or investing, or just curious about what's shaping India's infrastructure boom, this is the place to be. Today we're going to break down a research report from JM Financial that's got a ton of insights about this sector.
It's a really fascinating time for the industry, for sure.
Yeah.
A real turning point.
Okay, so let's unpack this. The report really seems to focus on one major theme: consolidation. It seems like the landscape is changing at an unprecedented pace.
It is, yeah. The report really traces this back to, the Adani Group's entry into the market back in September 2022. And their arrival really shook things up, triggered a wave of mergers and
So it's
acquisitions.
like an Adani effect that's rippled through the industry.
Exactly. And the numbers really highlight this shift. In just the last 2 years, we've seen 72 million tons of cement capacity change hands. To put that in perspective, in the entire decade before Adani got there, and if you exclude the Holcim deal, it was only 88 million tons. So yeah, it's been a whirlwind of activity.
That's a pretty stark contrast. And the report highlights this, saying that this rapid consolidation is unusual, given that historically the cement industry has moved at a much slower pace.
Hmm.
I wonder, has this speed taken industry experts by surprise?
Absolutely. It's been really fascinating to watch. And Adani has been a key player, aggressively acquiring companies like Orient Cement, Penna Cement, and Senghi Industries.
It makes you wonder who they're going to go after next. The report sort of dances around naming specific companies, but hints that companies with, high debt, maybe with a more regional focus, perhaps some with foreign ownership, with those really strong ESG goals, those could be vulnerable.
Yeah, those types of companies might be attractive in this climate. But it's not just Adani driving this consolidation. Ultratech Cement has also been, expanding aggressively, increasing their market share through both acquisitions and by adding organic capacity.
All right, Ultratech's playing both sides of the field. The report mentions that their capacity has gone from 116 million tons to 182 million tons, and that a significant 40% of that growth has come through acquisitions. What does that sort of two-pronged approach tell us about their strategy?
Well, it suggests that they're aiming for dominance on multiple fronts. They're not just buying up existing capacity, but investing in new capacity to really cement their position as the market leader.
So with both Adani and Ultratech making such big moves, is anyone else joining this consolidation party? What does the report say about continued M&A activity?
The report predicts that this trend will continue, although it's cautious about naming specific companies. But it's not just about acquisitions. The major players, especially the top six groups, are also putting money into organic capacity additions.
That sounds like it could lead to a massive increase in supply. How much new capacity are we talking about here?
The report estimates that between 2024 and 2027, these groups are going to add a staggering 150 million tons of capacity.
That is a lot of concrete. It sounds like we could be heading towards a situation where a handful of companies control a large chunk of the market. What kind of impact could that have?
Well, the analysts at JM Financial predict that this could push the combined market share of the top six groups to a commanding 68%. It would certainly give them a lot of influence.
So it's not just a shift in market share, but also a potential shift in power dynamics. But I did notice that the report mentions that there could be delays in these very ambitious capacity expansion plans.
Yes, that's important. Even with the best plans, there are always challenges. Things like, financing, land acquisition, the regulatory approvals can all cause delays.
So it's not just as simple as announcing these plans and then, it magically happens. There are real hurdles to overcome.
Absolutely. The analysts estimate that at least 10% to 12% of this planned capacity, that's roughly 15 to 20 million tons, could be pushed back. So it definitely adds complexity to an already dynamic situation.
It sounds like there are a lot of moving pieces. And it's not just on the supply side either. The report also points out that demand for cement in India is growing significantly.
Yeah, that's right. India's per capita consumption of cement is still significantly lower than the global average. So there's a lot of room for growth.
So even with all this increased capacity, there's still confidence that demand will keep pace. That seems like a crucial factor for the industry's health. What's the difference between India's consumption and that global average?
India's consumption is around 300 kilograms per capita, while the global average is somewhere between 500 and 550 kilograms. That's a pretty big difference.
So what's fueling this surge in demand in India? Is it just population growth, or are there other things going on?
Well, population growth is part of it, but the government is also investing heavily in infrastructure projects like highways and metros. That drives demand for cement. You've also got affordable housing schemes and an overall optimistic economic outlook, all contributing to this surge.
Okay, so we've got rapidly increasing demand and a wave of consolidation that's putting more market share in the hands of a few powerful players. It seems logical to assume that this would push cement prices up.
You would think so, right? But it's not that simple. Cement prices in India have actually been at record lows in recent years. It's a bit of a paradox.
That's a surprise. So, with demand going up and consolidation happening, what's driving these record low prices? The report must have some insight into that.
It does. It highlights a few key factors. First, there's intense competition. Companies are battling it out for market share, and sometimes that means sacrificing profits to gain an edge.
So it's more about securing a dominant position for the future than maximizing profits right now.
That's right. They're playing the long game, betting that consolidation will eventually give them greater control over pricing. Another factor is that this low price environment makes acquisitions even more attractive, which just fuels the consolidation cycle even more.
I see. So it's kind of a self-perpetuating cycle. Low prices encourage acquisitions, leading to greater concentration, which could then lead to more pricing control down the road. But it can't be all doom and gloom on the pricing front, right?
Right.
Are there any signs that this might be turning around?
Yeah, there are some glimmers of hope. The report mentions that there was a successful price hike back in December 2024. Pan-India prices rose by 3% month on month, which is pretty notable.
So a little light for the cement makers, but still a really challenging environment. What does that price hike tell us about the overall health of the industry? Is it a sign that things are stabilizing?
It's a positive development, yeah, but it's hard to say if it's a turning point yet. We'll have to wait and see if it can be sustained or if the competition drives prices back down.
So it sounds like a delicate balance between those competing forces. So how are these companies dealing with this challenging pricing environment? What are they doing to stay profitable?
Cost optimization is key. They're looking at ways to streamline operations, reduce waste, and just become more efficient overall.
It makes sense that they'd focus on controlling what they can, since market prices are so unpredictable. What are some of the specific things they're doing to achieve these cost savings?
It's a multi-pronged approach. One key area is energy efficiency. They're working on reducing energy consumption in their plants by upgrading technology and improving processes. Another area is the use of alternative fuels like fly ash, which can be a lot more cost-effective than traditional fuels.
So it's about being resourceful and finding creative ways to do more with less. Those sound like strategies that could benefit them no matter what's happening in the market.
Exactly. And perhaps the most significant change is the move towards renewable energy sources. We see this across many industries, but it's particularly impactful in cement production, which has always been very energy intensive.
Yeah, we all know about the environmental benefits of renewable energy, but it's also becoming a really smart financial move, especially with traditional energy costs being so volatile these days.
For sure. The report even points out that the cost of generating power from renewables can be as low as 1/7 the cost of thermal power generation. That's huge.
That is a big difference. No wonder companies are making the switch. Are there any specific examples of companies making significant commitments to renewable energy?
The Adani Group, for instance, has set a pretty ambitious goal to reduce their cost per ton by over INR 500 by 2028, and a big part of that will come from their switch to renewables.
That's a bold target. They've definitely shown that they're willing to change things up in the industry. Are they alone in this, or are others making similar moves?
They're not alone. Many of the other major players are making big investments in renewable energy as well. It's becoming a real differentiator in the industry.
It sounds like the Indian cement industry is in the middle of a huge transformation, driven by consolidation, technology, and sustainability.
It's a really exciting time to be watching this sector. There's a lot of uncertainty, but also a lot of potential.
Indeed. Well, we've covered a lot in this first part of our deep dive. We've looked at the consolidation, the record low prices, and the rising demand for cement in India.
And we've touched on some of the strategies companies are using to navigate all of that, especially cost optimization and the move to renewable energy.
Exactly. And in the next part, we're going to go deeper into the details of these cost optimization strategies.
We'll look at how they're using technology, exploring new materials, and of course, embracing renewable energy to stay ahead in this rapidly evolving market.
Sounds fascinating. Make sure to join us for part 2 of this deep dive into India's cement industry. Welcome back to our deep dive into India's cement industry. In the last part, we talked about the fierce competition and how companies are trying to optimize costs to stay afloat in a market with record low prices.
Right. And a major part of that, as we mentioned earlier, is the shift to renewable energy.
Absolutely. It's clearly a lot more than just a trend at this point. It seems vital for these companies looking to cut costs.
The report really emphasizes that, yeah. It says that generating power from renewable sources can cost as little as 1/7 of what it costs for traditional thermal power.
That's a massive difference.
Yeah.
It makes perfect sense when you think about how much energy it takes to produce cement. So are these companies just focusing on one type of renewable energy, or are they looking at a mix?
They're definitely diversifying. The report highlights investments in things like waste heat recovery systems, also known as WHRS, and also wind and solar power.
So it's like they're not putting all their eggs in one basket. Is there any indication of which type is proving more effective?
It seems to vary depending on the company and things like their location and existing infrastructure. The report does highlight some interesting examples, though. Ulfratech Cement, for example, they're aiming for 85% of their power to come from green sources by 2030. And then they've got an even more ambitious goal of 100% renewable energy by 2050.
Wow, those are some goals. It really shows how committed they are to sustainability. Are they an outlier, though, or are other companies setting similar targets?
Not at all. Ambuja Cement is targeting a 60% share of renewables by 2030, and Shree Cement is also on track to hit 100% renewable energy by 2050.
It sounds like a sector-wide movement then. What's driving this widespread adoption? Is it purely cost savings, or are there other factors?
Cost is definitely a big motivator, especially with prices the way they are right now, but there's also growing pressure to reduce their environmental impact.
I can see that. Investors are really starting to factor in those ESG considerations, and customers are also more aware of where their products come from.
Exactly. Switching to renewable energy allows them to address all those concerns at once. They lower their costs, they comply with regulations, and they appeal to investors who care about sustainability.
Smart move.
Yeah.
But renewable energy is just one part of the equation. The report also mentioned using alternative materials to save costs. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. One example is fly ash, which is a byproduct of burning coal. It's been used in cement for a while, but companies are finding ways to use even more of it.
So they're essentially turning waste into a valuable resource, good for the environment and good for their bottom line. What are the advantages of using fly ash in cement production?
Well, it reduces their need for traditional raw materials like limestone and clay, which can be expensive to extract. Plus, using fly ash can actually make the cement perform better in some cases.
So it's not just about cost cutting, it's also about potentially making a better product. Are they exploring any other innovative materials or approaches?
Oh yeah, they're constantly doing research and experimenting with new things. It's a never-ending process.
Sounds like they're leaving no stone unturned. But beyond materials and energy, where else are they finding savings?
Logistics is a big one. Cement is heavy and bulky, so transportation costs can be a big drain on their profits.
Right. And India's infrastructure, congested roads, limited rail capacity in some areas, can make things even more challenging.
Exactly. So companies are investing in things like railway sidings at their plants to make it easier to use trains to transport the cement.
That makes sense. Rail transport is generally cheaper and uses less energy than trucking, especially over longer distances.
Plus, it means they're not as reliant on roads, which, as you said, can be a headache.
So it's not just about saving money. It's about making the whole process more reliable. It sounds like they're really looking at their entire supply chain.
Absolutely. And they're using digital tools more and more to optimize their supply chains, keep track of inventory, and find better delivery routes.
So it's about leveraging technology to get ahead. Data analysis can uncover hidden inefficiencies and opportunities that they might not have noticed before.
Exactly. And it's not just about the tech itself, it's also about using that technology to help their employees work more effectively. Companies are investing in training, improving efficiency on the factory floor, and implementing lean manufacturing principles.
So it's like a holistic approach, not just relying on one solution, but implementing a bunch of strategies to optimize every part of their business.
Exactly. The companies that can do this most effectively will be the ones that thrive.
Right, but let's be real. Cost optimization is only half the battle. They need to raise cement prices to really improve profitability.
Absolutely. That price hike in December was a good sign, but we don't know if it's going to last.
Yeah, will demand be strong enough to justify higher prices? Will companies avoid undercutting each other and starting another price war? These are the big questions.
And the answers depend on a lot of factors,
Mhm.
including government policies, infrastructure spending, and how well the overall Indian economy is doing.
Lots of uncertainty still. It's a complex situation with a lot of moving parts.
That's what makes it so interesting to follow. There's never a dull moment.
Speaking of interesting, one company that caught my eye in the report was ACC Cement. What's their deal? What makes them stand out?
They've been around for a while, but they've really stepped up their game since becoming part of the Adani Group.
Mm.
Definitely one to watch.
That Adani effect again. We've talked about how their entry into the market has really been a catalyst for change. It sounds like they're bringing new energy to ACC. What kinds of changes have they made?
Well, they've announced plans to double their capacity to 140 million tons by 2028. That's a big goal.
That's bold, considering the current market. How are they planning to achieve that kind of growth? Are they going all in on acquisitions like we've seen with some of the other players?
It'll be a mix of organic growth and acquisitions. They've already got new clinker and cement capacity up and running in Amitha. And as far as acquisitions go, they've taken a majority stake in Asian Concrete and Cements.
So they're moving aggressively on both fronts. But doubling capacity is a risky bet if they can't also get their costs under control. How are they approaching that?
They're rolling out a comprehensive cost optimization plan, they call it PARVAT, focused on streamlining operations and improving efficiency everywhere.
Love a good code name, add a little mystery. But what are the actual goals of Parvat? How much do they want to cut costs by?
The Adani Group wants to reduce costs by over INR 500 per ton across all their cement businesses by 2028, and ACC is expected to play a big role in that.
That's a significant target. Sounds like they're taking a page from Ultratech's book, aiming for scale and efficiency. What are some of the things they're doing to achieve these savings?
Like many of their competitors, they're investing in renewable energy. Their goal is to hit a 60% share of renewables by 2028. That's up from just 12% in 2024.
That's a big jump. Shows how serious they are about changing their energy mix. Are they focusing on any particular type of renewable energy, or are they looking at everything?
They're looking at a variety of options. Solar, wind, waste heat recovery systems, all of those are on the table. But it's not just renewables. They're also working on using more alternative fuels, making their logistics more efficient, and securing long-term contracts for raw materials to protect themselves from price swings.
Sound like they're attacking costs on all fronts. They're really determined to be a low-cost producer, which would give them a big advantage in this market.
Exactly. And the analysts are impressed. JM Financial has a buy rating on ACC, suggesting they believe the company is in a good position for growth.
That's a strong vote of confidence. Sounds like ACC is definitely a company worth watching. Any other companies grabbing your attention?
Ambuja Cements, another Adani Group company, is also making some interesting moves.
Of course, it seems like Adani is everywhere these days. They're becoming a real force to be reckoned with in the industry. What's their strategy with Ambuja? Are they using the same playbook as ACC?
In some ways, yes. Ambuja is also targeting a capacity of 140 million tons by 2028, same as ACC, but they've taken a slightly different approach.
Okay, what's their unique angle? Are they focusing more on building new capacity or acquiring existing businesses?
They've been relying almost entirely on acquisitions to fuel their growth. They've been on a bit of a buying spree, snapping up companies like Sanghi Industries and Penna Cement.
Oh yeah, and remember their deal with Holcim? That was a big one. It really shook up the industry. It seems like they're willing to pay top dollar to get what they want.
For sure. They're not afraid to make big moves. They see consolidation as the key to winning in the long run, and they're putting their money where their mouth is.
So they're betting that consolidating the market will give them enough pricing power to make these expensive acquisitions worthwhile. It's a high-risk, high-reward strategy.
You got it. And they're also hoping to find significant cost savings by combining these newly acquired companies. That'll be crucial to making it all work.
Makes sense. But integrating all these acquisitions, especially the big ones, can be a huge challenge. Are there any potential pitfalls they need to watch out for?
Definitely. Combining different company cultures, streamlining operations, and achieving those cost savings will be tough. They'll need to execute their integration plans perfectly to avoid problems.
High stakes, but if they can pull it off, they could become a real powerhouse. We'll have to wait and see how it unfolds.
Agreed. Now, we've talked a lot about Adani and their companies, but let's not forget about the other players in the game. What about Ultratech? They're the current market leader, and they've hardly been sitting around watching all this happen.
Right, they've been expanding aggressively as well, both through acquisitions and by building new capacity. They're not giving up that top spot easily. What's their strategy for staying ahead?
They're taking a bit more of a measured approach than Adani. They're focusing on consolidating their acquisitions and making their operations as efficient as possible before they make any more big moves.
So they're prioritizing a strong foundation before they expand further. It's a more conservative approach, but it could be just as effective. What are some of Ultratech's key strengths?
They have a very strong financial position and they generate a lot of cash. That gives them the resources to compete with anyone. They're also known for running their operations very well and for being good at integrating acquisitions.
It sounds like they're playing the long game, building a sustainable and profitable business. But are they at risk of being overtaken by Adani with all their expansion?
It's definitely possible, but Ultratech isn't standing still. They're still investing heavily in capacity expansion and cost reduction initiatives.
It's going to be interesting to see who comes out on top. But it's not just a two-horse race. What about some of the other players like Dalmia Bharat, JK Cement, Ramco Cements, and Star Cement? What are their chances in this market?
Each of those companies has its own strengths and weaknesses, its own growth plans and cost-cutting strategies. The report takes a closer look at each of them, highlighting the challenges and opportunities they face.
Sounds like we have a lot more to discuss. I'm looking forward to learning more about those other players and how they're positioning themselves for success.
Then let's move on to part 3 of our deep dive, where we can explore those other companies in more detail.
Welcome back to the deep dive. In this last part, we're going to look at some of the other big players in the Indian cement industry. We've already talked about those giants, Adani and Ultratech, but there are a bunch of other companies fighting for their share of this growing market.
Yeah, for sure. And each company is approaching this dynamic landscape in their own way. Some are all about that aggressive expansion, while others are taking a slower, more careful approach.
Right. And as we said, there's no single recipe for success in this industry. So let's start with Dalmia Bharat. They've been pretty quiet compared to, say, Adani when it comes to acquisitions, right?
Yeah, they haven't made any big purchases since they got those JPA assets, and the report says they haven't announced any significant organic growth plans lately either.
So does that lack of activity mean they're falling behind? It seems like everyone's consolidating so fast it's hard to imagine just standing still and being competitive.
That's a valid point. The report actually suggests that Dalmia Bharat might fall behind those giants, Ultratech and Adani, when it comes to growing their volume and profitability, at least in the medium term.
Interesting. So even though they're a big player, they could be overshadowed by those rapidly growing competitors.
That's what it seems like. The report points out a couple of reasons for that. First, their limited capacity expansion means they might lose market share as their competitors grow more aggressively. And second, their main markets are in the South and East, which are really competitive and where prices are all over the place.
Right. Those ripples from Adani we talked about are affecting everyone, even those not directly involved in the acquisitions.
Exactly. And to make things even tougher, they're also facing new competition in the Northeast from Ultratech, who recently bought a chunk of Star Cement.
So they're feeling the pressure from all sides. Sounds like a tough spot. But they're not just giving up, right? What's their plan for dealing with all this?
They're focusing on what they can control, like cutting costs and being more efficient. The report highlights a few things they're doing, including improving their logistics, using more of their own coal, and shifting to greener energy sources.
Sounds like a good plan. Every rupee saved can help them make more money in this competitive market. And going green is a smart move, like we talked about earlier. Are they doing anything else to stand out from the crowd?
Yeah, they've committed to using 100% blended cement by 2026. That means using materials like fly ash in their cement mixes.
That's a good step. It goes back to that idea of being resourceful and not relying so much on traditional raw materials. What are the advantages of blended cement, though? Does it change the quality of the final product?
Actually, it can make it even better in some ways. Blended cement can last longer, be less permeable, and generate less heat as it sets. And it's also more sustainable because it reduces their carbon footprint and saves natural resources.
Sounds like a win-win. So even though they're facing some challenges, Dalmia Bharat is trying new things to adapt to the market. They're all about efficiency, sustainability, and using that blended cement to their advantage.
Exactly. It shows that there are many ways to succeed in this industry. It's not all about being the biggest, but also about making smart decisions.
Okay, let's move on to another player, JK Cement. What's their story? Are they doing something similar to Dalmia Bharat, or are they going in a different direction?
JK Cement is much more focused on growth. They want to double their capacity to 50 million tons by 2030. That's way faster than the industry average.
Wow, that's ambitious. It sounds like they're not content with where they are now. Are they planning to do that through acquisitions, like the Adani model?
Not really. It seems like they're mainly focused on organic growth, building new plants in different areas.
So they're doing their own thing, building their own capacity instead of buying it. That's a different approach, but it could work just as well. What are some of the things that could help them succeed?
One important factor is where their markets are. About 75% of their capacity is in the north and central regions of India, and those areas are generally more profitable and less unpredictable than the south and east.
So they're in good locations, focusing on areas where the competition isn't quite as fierce. That's a good start. But what about their costs? Can they compete with Adani and Ultratech on price?
They've got some good initiatives in place to manage their costs. They're aiming to use green power for 75% of their needs by 2030, for example. They're also improving their logistics and using more alternative fuels like fly ash and petcoke.
Sounds like they're doing all the right things to control their costs and be more sustainable. And their focus on organic growth in profitable regions gives them a strong base to build on. It's a good story.
What did the analysts think about JK Cement?
They seem pretty optimistic. They've given JK Cement a buy rating, which means they think the company has a lot of potential to grow.
Okay, so JK Cement is another one to watch. They're doing things differently than some of the others, but they seem to be in a good position. Now, let's talk about Ramco Cements. What are their strengths and weaknesses?
Ramco Cements is a little more complicated. They're facing a tougher situation than some of the companies we've talked about so far.
Okay, what are the challenges they're up against? Is it their market position, their costs, or something else entirely?
Their main markets are in the south and east, and those regions are expected to be super competitive. They're seeing a lot of new capacity, both from new plants and acquisitions, which is putting pressure on prices.
Right, so even if demand is going up, the increased supply is keeping prices low, making it tough to make money. Exactly. And the report says Ramco's profits are probably going to be up and down in the short term. Their volume growth is also expected to slow down to about 7% in the next few years, which is way less than the double-digit growth they've had lately.
That doesn't sound too encouraging for investors. So they've got some serious headwinds to deal with. But are there any bright spots for Ramco, or are they just stuck in a rut?
Well, they're not just sitting around doing nothing. They're taking steps to deal with these challenges, mainly by focusing on cutting costs and getting their finances in order.
So they're trying to control what they can in a tough situation. What are some of the things they're doing specifically?
They're planning to sell some assets that aren't core to their business, which will give them some cash and help pay down debt. That'll give them more flexibility to deal with the ups and downs of the market.
That's always a good move,
Sure.
especially when things are uncertain. But it sounds like they're mostly playing defense, just trying to ride out the storm instead of going after more growth.
Yeah, that seems to be their strategy for now. And the analysts are being a bit more cautious about Ramco, giving them a hold rating, which reflects those challenges they're facing.
Okay, so Ramco Cements has some work to do, but they're at least trying to improve things. We'll have to see if they can make it through these challenges and come out stronger.
Yeah, agreed. A lot will depend on things they can't really control, like how tough the competition is and what happens with the overall economy.
True enough. Now, for our last company, let's look at Star Cement. They're strong in the Northeast, a region that's been really profitable, right?
Right. The Northeast has been a pretty safe place for cement companies, not much competition, and decent profit margins. Star Cement has been the main player there, doing quite well for themselves.
But remember how Ultratech recently bought a stake in Star Cement? That's definitely shaken things up. What does it mean for the company's future?
Definitely. A lot of people think Ultratech might try to buy the whole company eventually, and that uncertainty is making investors a little nervous.
So Star Cement's future is a bit unclear at the moment. But even with that uncertainty, they're still a good company with potential for growth, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The Northeast is developing fast, which means more demand for cement. Star Cement is in a good position to take advantage of that, and they're planning to double their capacity to 15 million tons by 2030.
Impressive. So even with the possibility of takeover, they're still going for it. Are they doing anything specific to protect their market share from Ultratech?
They're really focused on being efficient and keeping their costs low so they can offer competitive prices. They're also relying on their strong local presence and relationships to keep their foothold in the region.
Sounds like they're ready to put up a fight. They want to protect what they've built and take advantage of those growth opportunities.
Yeah.
It's kind of a David and Goliath situation
Mm-hmm.
with Star Cement going up against the much bigger Ultratech.
Definitely a compelling story. We'll see how it plays out.
What do the analysts think about Star Cement? Do they think they can hold off Ultratech and stay independent?
Right now, they're taking a wait-and-see approach, giving them a hold rating. They see the potential for growth and profits, but acknowledge the uncertainty about who will own the company in the future.
Sounds like a company with both potential and risk. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground today, exploring the ins and outs of the Indian cement industry. We've talked about the big trend of consolidation, the fierce competition, the pressure on prices, and how companies are trying to survive in this tough environment.
We've also talked about the importance of keeping costs low, the shift towards renewable energy, and how they're using new and innovative materials. And we've looked at a bunch of different companies, each with their own unique way of trying to succeed.
It's been a really interesting look into a complex and constantly changing industry. And it seems like there's much more to come. Lots of unanswered questions, lots of potential for growth and change.
Absolutely. The Indian cement industry is at a turning point, and the choices these companies make in the next few years will determine whether they sink or swim.
That's a great way to put it. It's an industry full of opportunities for those who can adapt and innovate, but also full of challenges for those who can't keep up. I'm really interested to see what happens next. Thanks for helping us make sense of it all.
It's been my pleasure. The Indian cement industry is a perfect example of the bigger trends we see in the global economy. Consolidation, new technologies, and the growing focus on sustainability. It's all there.
Well said. And for our listeners, I encourage you to keep exploring these themes and keep an eye on this industry. There's always something new to learn, always something new happening.
Until next time, keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep investing in your knowledge.
We'll see you on our next deep dive.